So we're going to get on with the first panel of the day. And for those of you who have just sat through Hugh talking about textile recycling, we're straight into not only what Mate spoke about first thing today on the EU Green Deal and how it applies to textiles, but we have 4 characters, and the sports trade thinks that we're at the leading edge of what we're doing with textiles. These people actually concentrate in the main fashion section of the textile industry, and they are more progressed on the projects they're doing than we are. Take that on board. We always lead the way. No, this is practice which is better than we're already employing. And listening to Hugh, I was really impressed that they are now coming up to the bar. But I'm so fortunate. I have Cyndi, I have Ross, I have Harald, and I have Helene. I'm going to try not to talk, but Charles will always interrupt. I want you to listen to these people. They are not technically connected to each other, but only through constant conversation have they progressed working together. This is change which is going on right now, and we as the sports and outdoor industry need to come up to speed. So if I do it politely, Cyndi, can I ask you to say who you are and what you're bringing to this conversation?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Cyndi Rhoades, and I'm the founder of Worn Again Technologies. I'll explain a bit about what we do and why we're here today. So we have been in development of a polymer recycling technology that can take in end-of-use textiles, non-rewearable textiles. We're not looking for disrupting or taking in anything that can be rewearable. It can be post-consumer, post-industrial. We're agnostic to where it comes from. It can be sportswear, it can be outdoor, as long as it's made up of pure polyester or polycotton blends. And we can go into feedstock specifications later, but that's our general rule of thumb. We can take in those end-of-use textiles, put them through a process, separate the polyester and the cotton to produce 2 outputs. One is a PET pellet, which is the equivalent in structure and makeup as you would get from virgin-derived polyester. And then on the cotton front, we're able to dissolve that and recapture the cellulose in the form of a cellulose powder. And both of those outputs can then go back into the supply chain to be spun back into new fiber. So that's the concept, that's the technology. In terms of where we're at, we started the development of this back in 2012. And we still aren't to market because a technology like this takes a huge amount of investment, a huge amount of time, expertise, scientists, chemical engineering to get it to market. And so we've recently announced the launch of our demonstration plant, which is going to take place in Zurich, in Switzerland, or just outside Zurich. We've gone from lab scale to pilot. Now this is the demonstration plant, which is really big for us because the demonstration plant represents the small scale version of the industrial plant. And once you've got your demo, you're ready to license the technology and build multiple plants worldwide. And really that's our goal, is to scale as rapidly and quickly as possible and to move to a place where we can start replacing the use of virgin resources globally, along with some of our other friends here today. So that's where we're at. We just closed on a recent round of finance raise of 30 million pounds, which again is a significant step forward in making this happen, because I would say that's been one of our biggest challenges, is the finance raise and getting the confidence and the belief from investors, from strategic partners, to invest in this type of of innovation. But as we're seeing and being at trade shows like this, the industry has woken up. Now it's about how do we get there as quickly as possible and get everyone behind this.
And Charles, in a really patronizing way, is just going to emphasize what Cyndi passed over. Polycotton is the third most popular fabric in the world, and we can't do anything with it at end of life. We now have a solution. Combine that also with the EU eco-design element of the Green Deal, where we're going to lose the recycled polyester stock that we take from drinks bottles. Drinks bottles have to go back to drinks bottles. We're going to lose 96% of our recycled polyester feedstock. Cyndi can provide. Join the dots. That's all I'm saying. I'm now going to go virtual. Helen, would you like to introduce yourself and say why we've invited you onto the panel, please? How you're going to make life easier for us.
Oh, I hope so. Hi, Charles. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I've been having a bit of a cold, so I hope my voice will hold today. My name is Helene Smit. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer at Recover. And Recover is a material science company and a global producer of low-impact, high-quality recycled cotton fiber and cotton fiber blends. So we're also in the recycling business, like Cyndi. Textile waste is our raw material. We also use post-industrial, post-consumer. We're at the same time agnostic to that. And we transform that into recycled fibers without the addition of solvents or water. We have manufacturing operations in Spain, Pakistan, and Bangladesh at the moment, and also expanding into other regions such as Vietnam and Central America. To explain a little bit more about the technology, we are a mechanical recycler of cotton. I mean, in essence, that's quite a simple process, and I think a lot of you might already know this. We shred cotton textile waste fabrics that otherwise would go to landfill or incineration, and we create fibers in a way that they can be used again in yarns, in all kinds of different products that you can create: apparel, home textiles, you name it. And even though this is simple, there is an art and science to this, and Recover has been kind of perfecting this art for the past 75 years to keep the quality and the integrity of the fiber as high as possible. The main advantage of mechanical recycling is really the low impact. The process uses only very limited water, solvents, energy. 1 kilogram of recycled cotton, compared with conventional cotton, for example, can save up to 14,000 liters of water. The CO2 impact is almost 10 times lower than for conventional cotton. So these are all, of course, very important and more important drivers. And another very important point to address, where we are a little bit different than, let's say, Cyndi or Harald, who will introduce himself also in a moment, is really what comes in goes out. So mechanical recycling doesn't really change anything about the fiber. And this is a very positive thing when it comes to, let's say, cotton. So cotton stays cotton. However, it's a challenge when it comes to contamination. So you can have contaminated fibers, like, for example, elastane, or the presence of polyester sewing threads in the cotton textile waste, non-cotton components, and they also end up in the fiber as a contamination. This can be really a disadvantage, and this is especially the case for post-consumer, right? So post-industrial waste is quite controlled, and we can really eliminate this contamination. Post-consumer is a bit more tricky, and we'll dive into that topic, I guess, with in some later questions. But maybe just to, and that's, I think, all about Recover for now. We do intend to scale up quite rapidly and aim to have a capacity of over 200,000 metric tons by 2025. So hoping to get recycled cotton as a fiber to really grow in the market and be really adopted in the market.
Now, the next person I'm going to introduce sums up why we should be focusing on this conversation. Harald from Newcell have worked with HiQ, and they're taking natural fibers, recycling them, and getting synthetic performance. If you remember, I introduced this whole subject by saying we in sports and outdoor have overlooked this because we think it's natural fibers, it's not good enough for us. They've leapfrogged us, and they're performing better. So Harald, it's all yours. Say why you're here. And I'm so sorry, the pair of you, you've got proper jobs, so you can't take days off to come here. We're so grateful you've made time to speak to us.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's great to be part of it, and great to be able to speak to this particular crowd. I'm Harald. I'm strategy director at Newcell, and what we do is conceptually very similar to what you heard Cyndi describe just now, very eloquently. So I'll just highlight maybe the differences. So what we do is that we focus on cellulosic textile waste, post-industrial, post-consumer textile waste. And cellulosic is, of course, mainly cotton, but also viscose, lyocell, and the other man-made cellulosic fibers. That's what we recycle. And we take it in and put it in our patented polymer recycling process. And what we get out is this. It's a sheet of cellulose dissolving pulp that we call circulose. Yeah, it's getting hard with the screen. Yeah, but it feels and looks a lot like paper. And this type of product is the precursor to making man-made cellulosic fibers. So we take 100% textile waste in, and what we come out with is a virgin equivalent precursor for making man-made cellulosic fibers. And that's what we sell. We sell those sheets. You can make viscose out of them. You can make lyocell out of them. You can make filaments, staple fiber length out of them. And that's the kind of thing that we then add to what Recover does. In that you, through this process, you can get the desired fiber length back. But crucially, it's our customer that does that. So HiQ, for example, which was mentioned just now, is a very exciting collaboration that we're doing. They have developed a process for making a synthetic equivalent high tenacity viscose filament yarn based on bio-based materials such as dissolving pulp. Together then with HiQ, we can put circulose into this type of material, and all of a sudden you have a 100% recycled, 100% bio-based, biodegradable yarn with synthetic polymer characteristics. Now, that particular fiber isn't on the market yet. We're still in development, but it's looking very exciting. We have been commercially active since 2019. So products containing fibers made from the circulose pulp are in stores. Just today we launched with a Swedish brand called Filippa K a couple of styles. We've had several launches with H&M, with Zara, with PVH, Tommy Hilfiger. So we're very happy to now really gaining an acceleration on the market, seeing that there's a lot of traction with this type of product and fibers made from it. And that demand has made it possible for us to now scale up into commercial industrial scale in our production. So the picture behind me, I'm going to move my head a bit, shows our, it's hard to point, but it shows our new industrial scale dissolving pulp plant where we, in Sundsvall in Sweden, where we will eventually produce 120,000 tons per year, at least. It's opening up. We're now in ramping production. So we're commercially operating now at that plant and are looking forward to making fashion circular at massive scale there. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Harald. And when we get the discussion going, when he starts to talk scale, you'll see what I mean by how progressed the thinking is. Now, the fourth member of the panel is Ross. I bumped into Ross most probably a decade ago, and he was just a textile recycler. and he had the most phenomenal social program. And that was what held on to in my head. Everything is about corporate social responsibility, and we have been fixated on the environmental impact. Ross brings a new dimension into it. He educated me as to what social really is. And then a couple of years ago, you start Reskinned, which is something else. But I'm taking away your gravitas. Ross, introduce yourself and why you're here.
Thank you, Charles, for that. Pleasure to be here and sitting on this panel. Yeah, I probably sit out slightly separate. We're Reskinned Resources. We're not a textile recycler. In fact, textile recycling is the last thing what we want to do. If anyone's lucky to listen to Charles yesterday, he talked through, you know, the conflicting views of what is sustainability, environmental. We're looking to keep clothing in use as long as possible. So that's the most environmental way. So, you know, having sustainable clothing that lasts a lifetime is what we're after. So our company works with brands. We put an app into their sort of online store. Customers can then say, okay, I no longer want this garment. Very simple process. They tick what they're going to send it back to us. We validate it. Within about 20 seconds, they get a voucher, which means they can buy a new garment, or they can also buy a garment off of our website. So it's then checked, sorted, graded. If it needs a repair, we repair it. We sanitize it. Our idea is that, you know, we sort of look at the car industry 20 years ago. The likes of BMW, Audi wouldn't be seen sort of anywhere near a second-hand car lot. Now pre-owned is one of their biggest sales channels. Ford, I think you said yesterday, wasn't it? You know, their biggest market now is the rental and leasing of cars. So the whole dynamic of the market's changing. People are looking at how they can keep clothes in use from a brand's perspective. If they work with us, they can obviously see who's buying what. They get that loyalty loop. They reconnect with the customer. And, you know, essentially, they get to sell the same item twice, which, you know, for anybody is a good thing. So we will help them do that. And, you know, we're trying to make it easy for the consumer to send back. They don't have to think about it. It's completely sort of like easy for them. And hopefully it's easy for the brands. But after that, you know, inevitably, you know, stuff gets well loved and it gets used. A lot of the brands that have signed up with us are outwear brands, and, you know, that stuff's been up and down in a mountain. So unfortunately, you can't always reuse it. So yes, we will recycle it if we absolutely have to, which is where we come in with these guys. You know, as you've heard, there's various technologies out there. There's some that are focusing on polycottons, some on cottons. There's mechanical recycling. And, you know, that's not easy to know what each of these companies need. We hopefully do. So we talk to them. We will aggregate stock across all the brands we work with, and we deal in post-consumer waste. So we've got a massive pool of second-hand clothing. Charles, help me out. Is there 1 million tons of clothing a year disposed of in landfill in the UK alone? It's something...
We used to dispose of 1.5 million tons a year in the UK alone. We've now got it down to 1/3 of a million tons. If you know Wembley Football Stadium with a big arch, we fill that full of textiles to put into landfill in the UK each year. Why?
I think the figures we're generating over 1 million. We're now collecting just over 700,000 tons, but over 300,000 are still going to landfill.
That's probably a bit, everyone sits there and you guys think in terms of garments, I'm sure, not tons. You know, I think if you filled this entire room, you'd only be looking at 1,000 tons. So, you know, there's processing plants that are doing that a day. It is absolutely ridiculous. And it's scary, actually. So, you know, we have to work together and work out a solution for this. As was alluded to earlier, there's not the collecting, the sorting, the grading infrastructure that's at a level that can handle this. It is there. You know, our company's been doing it over 30 years. Helene said her company's been mechanically recycling 70. We are building on strong foundations. You know, we have a zero to landfill policy, zero incineration. We will find somewhere for it to go. And, you know, sometimes it's often called downcycling, which is a term I hate. You know, it's sort of this idea that you have to raise the level. Well, that's alchemy. We're not at alchemy yet. Sometimes you have to accept that your clothes are going to be shredded and it's going to end up being insulation for a car or a house. But that's no bad thing, and that's probably offsetting virgin material, which in a lot of cases, this technology, this industry's been lost because people have said, oh, it's cheaper to buy new. It might be cheaper and easier to buy new, but that doesn't make it the right thing. So hopefully we're building on those foundations, and there's new technology coming through. As Cyndi said, there's a lot of investment in this industry, and thankfully, it does seem people are willing to invest because they know, well, there isn't a second planet, is there? So that's me. Thank you, Charles.
If I ask the public what their big worry is about with sports and outdoor, no matter how much I try and re-educate them, I know plastic in the ocean is the single biggest thing. And I'm aware there is more cellulose in the ocean than there is synthetic. I don't have a problem with that. When our public perceive the materials we're using are adding to this problem, I started to look elsewhere. And I met the four of them at the Future Fabric Expo in London. And I was amazed how many outdoor brand developers were there. We were looking for inspiration outside our market. And I'm going to move this conversation on quite rapidly. I want them to talk about the social side of this whole situation. We can go into detail on the environmental side, but you can follow them all up individually. And I'm actually going to start virtually again. Harald, I want you to lead off about our social responsibility within this industry, please.
Definitely, that's a big part of our impact that we inevitably have as a growing company and as a company that comprises human activity overall. Being operating in Sweden with our production plants, we have a lot good going for us with collective bargaining agreements and decent standards for the workers that are in within our operations and the suppliers locally. But then we are sourcing our input materials globally, and we have to be very cognizant of the fact that these are we're sourcing textile waste in areas that have social risk to labor and other conditions there. So we are very much focused on working with well-vetted, well-regarded sorters and collectors, companies like Reskinned, of course, and others, because we cannot find enough textile waste locally. The way this industry is set up is that, for better or worse, the textile waste that's generated is to a large extent exported outside of Europe or outside close to us. Now our plant is well positioned where it is because we have 100% renewable energy in there, so it should be where it is, and we have a whole lot of knowledge that we can build out of that. But that means that we have to think very closely about how we go about responsibly sourcing the textile waste coming in to where we are. On the post-industrial side, we're working closely directly with mills, for example, that are already selling their virgin products into Europe, and making sure that they adhere to the standards of the companies that they sell to. So that's one part. But in the other end, for the post consumer part, we need to make sure that we can access for audits, make sure that they follow our supplier code of conduct, make sure that they treat their workers well and in line with our expectations and the expectations of our customers and the full value chain. So anybody active in the recycling space will have to consider this. And also, as the Green Deal comes online and we look at ways of improving the collection and sorting in Europe, we have to think about how this can create opportunities for jobs and well-paying jobs in Europe, to make sure that doesn't create social problems, and also make sure that we stop, I think, the export of pure waste from Europe that is close to us, and make sure that we can divert that for recycling with recycling operators such as Worn Again, ourselves, and Recover before they get exported and then deemed as waste at the destination. And that will, come about through a set of economic incentives and policy frameworks that are on development, but also the development of infrastructure for automated sorting and more efficient logistics value chains within close to home, so to speak. So social aspect to textile recycling is big and an important factor to consider as we start growing this ecosystem.
I just want to re-emphasize that we have turned a blind eye. We have ignored the export of waste clothing going abroad. This is how we're going to change it. Helen, can I ask you to add to what we've heard from Harald, please? What you're doing at Recover.
Yeah, no, happy to. Of course, at the moment, the biggest part of our feedstock is still post-industrial. And what we're seeing now, for example, also with our plant located in Bangladesh, that the waste supply chain there, where all the sorting and grading is happening of post-industrial waste as well, is has been kind of outside of the focus of all the industry standards that we've been applying right to the traditional value chain. So this is the supply chain of the future. It's if we want to work circular, this is a part of the supply chain. It's going to be part of the formal supply chain, and so needs to also adhere to these codes of conduct and these, best practices that we want. But that's not yet the case. So we have to be quite realistic in that. And I think what Harald is saying, also working directly with mills, that's great, but it's a huge job field in Bangladesh, at least. So working directly with mills is the solution, but it's also then cutting out a problem that is kind of still there. And so what we're trying to do is trying slowly, step by step, increasing the compliance levels, social compliance levels, environmental compliance levels of this supply chain. But it's definitely a difficult thing to do as a recycler. And that's also a little bit where I'll here to do a little bit of a call to action, because if the brands and retailers want circular products, we all as an industry need to take responsibility for this supply chain and kind of tackle this as an alliance. It's not something that a single organization or a single recycler or even a single brand can tackle. And it's not only Bangladesh. We know that other countries also struggle with very low compliance levels because it's just been in the shadows. People have not been looking there up to this point. So that's something to be aware of and something that we're working really hard to tackle, but it's we don't want to turn a blind eye, and I think nobody in the industry we shouldn't be turning a blind eye. And,
this is showing the amount of quality thinking going on. So now, Cyndi, can you build on what we've just heard from these two?
I'll try. They covered quite a few of the main points there, but what's hopefully coming clear here is that we are now looking at not just one supply chain, which is our conventional supply chain, where we source raw materials, they go into yarn, fabric, textiles, garments. We now have the post-industrial textile waste. I don't like the word waste, but resource, all the scraps and everything produced in the manufacturing process, as well as the post-consumer textile supply chain, post-consumer collection and sorting. So we now have two different supply chains that we have to address and bring it together into this circular value network. And it's bringing up, we're only now as an industry starting to really improve the conventional supply chain. Now we have another one to deal with that has been in the dark for many decades. But with circularity, we need to put it in the light and start making improvements because there are a lot of problems there. The other thing is, if you look at the opportunity, there are many different figures around how much textile waste is out there in the world, but one of the figures I hear commonly is 92 million tons of textile waste being generated every year. That is a huge amount of resource, and only 85%, well, 15% of it's getting collected. The other 85% is going to landfill. So we have this massive challenge to completely evolve the infrastructure for collection, for recycling, but we have a little bit of a gap in terms of when we're going to be able to handle that textile waste that we collect. Because I was jotting down some numbers, and I like to think about the big picture here. So if we're looking to replace the use of virgin resources for the most part, and we're looking at polyester and cotton, we're producing over 60 million tons of new virgin materials every year. So if we're going to replace that with mechanical recycling and chemical recycling, the number of plants we're going to need to build to do that is around 1,200. 1,200 plants operating at 50,000 tons per year. Newcell are operating at, you've built yours, is it 120,000 tons a year?
Eventually,
Eventually.
Yes.
And
targeting 360 by 2030. Yeah.
Great. And
what that means in English is they will take a 40-foot container in less than an hour. That's how quickly they're getting through the material. So we're taking 3 40-foot containers in 2 hours. We need to have a system that can work this.
And that is the bit that needs the most work. It's evolving the infrastructure for collection, because the volumes of what are getting collected today are still extremely small. And as Harald was saying, what is getting collected, say in the UK and Europe, a lot of it's getting exported to regions where sorting is lower, labor costs, which is why we need to move to advanced textile sorting with automated systems close to the source of recycling. So we intend to have our plants just like Renewcell. They're in Sweden. That's where the technology was developed. With us, we're looking at the UK, we're looking at Europe, where there's high volumes of post-consumer textiles generated. Recover are in Bangladesh. They're smart. They're working right at the source of post-industrial waste generation. But in these regions, the level of sorting, it needs to evolve quite radically to be able to supply us with the volumes, with the truckloads, multiple truckloads every day of consistent supply. And with that is going to come a big opportunity on the social side, because we're redesigning some of the jobs, a lot of the jobs on this part of the supply chain. And I think that's the exciting bit. And that's where the legislation, if we get this right from the beginning, we're not going to make the same mistakes that we have done historically in the conventional textile supply chain. So I think there's a lot of work, but it's an area that is just starting to get talked about a little bit more, but a very exciting one.
To give you some idea of what scale there is, when they're talking about the number of plants, Harald, you told me we need 50 plants in Europe taking 3 truckloads every 2 hours. Just get your head around this, the amount going on. It's 50 in Europe will really make us wake up. And this is new textile generation.
Yeah, I mean it is a massive undertaking, but we have an industrial society. It's graspable, at least. I think we talked about last time we saw each other, Cyndi. It's a massive undertaking, but it's 50. You can think about it. You can imagine it. But I just wanted also to add to the very, if I may, just to the very important last point that Cyndi made, the opportunity for improvement here, because with the type of scrutiny that has been placed on the fashion value chain since the Rana Plaza disaster and since then, there has been a lot of policy development, a lot of thinking, a lot at least among the bigger brands about how to govern, how to better improve the value chain sorting. Not at all saying that it's done and it's dusted and everything's fine, but there's programs and activism and investigative journalism, things like that there, and a lot of learnings that we can now use to turn what has been a very gray area, that's the handling of textile waste or other discarded materials, into something that's that's legit and that has well-paying jobs and socially conscious value chains. So I just wanted to add that there's an opportunity here to build upon what's already been done. So thank you for that, Cyndi.
But I also want to turn back to Ross. Ross is actually operating on a local level, and it's this social responsibility. And the reason Ross used to be chairman of the Textile Recycling Association, he's actually quite modest about it. But I'd like you to go into a little bit more detail about the social approach you have and how you run your plant.
Yeah, so as Charles said, my background is textile reuse and recycling, so our company's been over 40 years, and my dad started in the mid-80s, and that's very much when you sort of went from people buying clothes, wearing them, fashion came in, and we got the very start of fast fashion. Since then, it's gone absolutely mad, and we now got double the clothes than we did 10 years ago. But at that point, we set up a company in the East End of London, 10 members of staff, went on to employ 200, sorting and grading this clothing, and something from the waste industry called the proximity principle. So you deal with the waste as close to home as you can. So the idea is, we sell clothing to people that need it, and a lot of the time, people in the UK, people in Europe don't need to buy cheap clothing. Whereas if you go to Africa, you go to Eastern Europe, places that don't have the same income, they can't afford new clothing, and they don't have access to it. So prolonging life of clothing is always the most sustainable way. The problem is, and it's unregulated. This industry needs regulation. You shouldn't be able to ship container loads of clothes, of coats or damaged clothes to Africa, because it's a linear model still. They're going to wear it and it's going to throw away and it's going to end up in a landfill site, or not even a landfill site, it's going to end up on a beach. This shouldn't be happening. And the fact that there's so many clothes out there is just making this harder and harder. Africa is swamped with clothes. Pakistan's swamped with clothes. Our discarded clothing, we can't keep doing it. This business model's failed. So we have to get that circular loop, keep resources in action for as long as we can. Sometimes I think where we come from, a waste industry, it all seems a bit doom and gloom, but I think actually clothing and textiles, it shouldn't be. Actually, people have a real emotional connection to their clothes. Like, you're in sportswear, so hopefully somebody's bought an item of clothing off you, it's at a high level, they want it, they've completed their personal best in it. They don't think it's going to go in landfill and be ruined. They'd like to think it's going to go on to something else. And I think that's sort of the messaging that we can get to help collect this clothing. So you can put it out and say, you've had your time, you've had fun with this item, bring it back, we'll do something, we'll find somebody else that wants it, or we'll recycle it into a new garment. And, don't feel guilty. Take that money and go and spend it on something else that you will want and you will love and you will cherish. And, that's a feel-good factor. And I think if we can get that social aspect and explain to people, make the right choices, and when you've done that, work with the people you bought it off, because they've put it out into the world, so they've got responsibility to take it back. And together we can hopefully build a system that will work and isn't just like the old linear system that clearly isn't working.
Now I'm going to attempt to do something quite dangerous. I could go on to this panel for a couple of hours. I have had more virtual questions asked of this panel than the whole of yesterday. So I'm actually going to ask our 4 people here. You're now sat in front of the designers and the fabric developers. What takeaway message do you want them to leave with? How should they reassess their job, reassess what they're designing, the fabrics they're bringing in, the mixes? But whilst you're thinking of how to answer that, I'm just going to read through the questions, and you can pick and choose which ones you want to answer. We've got things like, with the export obstacles, like the cost, to the EU post-Brexit, how will the UK be able to collaborate with the EU-based textile sorting, disassembly, and recycling hubs? Thank you, Anne. Chemicals, one of the biggest hurdles in recycling. There are a lot of chemicals used in the textile processing that are considered impurities for the recycling process. We've also got, considering its negative impact, what's the future of polyester? Will it be replaced by other materials, or can we move to fibre recycled poly only? And is the future of textile recycling the chemical recycling? Can elastane be separated from cotton in the chemical recycling process? There are a couple of other questions, but between those 5 I've given you, but can you first answer? You have your audience. What do you want the audience to change so that what they're producing can work better within our circular system? So I'm going to start with you, Ross, reverse it round. What message do you want to give the next generation of designers? How can they make their job work with the process that you're operating?
I think quite simply, you're designers, and I'm not going to try and pretend I know exactly what you do, but I'd like to imagine that, you're putting something into the world, and you've got to work out what's going to happen when it does naturally come to the end of its life. So start thinking whatever you're doing now is probably going to have an impact in 5 years' time, because by the time you've designed it, it's gone back and forth on sampling, it's been in production, and then unfortunately, this happens, it sits in the back of someone's wardrobe for a year, and then they go, oh, I don't like that anymore. Or if you're me, it's like, I'm too fat for that, so I'm going to throw it away. So yeah, start thinking and get in touch. Start talking outside of your normal sphere. Sort of talk to people like these guys here, or to us, and just say, we're looking at doing this. If I change this one small bit, will that make it easier for you to disassemble it? How will that impact on it being recycled? And we might not have all the answers, but if we all work collaboratively, and I think that is the answer here, no single brand's big enough to do this on their own. Patagonia have said they like crying out for help for people to help them. Just some simple things like, if you do make something, buy some extra buttons, because when it comes back to us, we need those buttons to fix it. Just silly little things that, just start thinking outside of your normal day-to-day job and how you can probably look at things when, sadly comes to the end of its life.
Dare I say, it's just common sense, Ross. We're not doing the joined-up thinking. Can we now go on to Cyndi? How would you like them to make their process better?
Well, I'm going to contradict Ross and say, don't put more buttons in, because we have to strip all of those off to recycle. But this is the early days that we're all at in designing for circularity. And there are many different views, and I think we've still, as an industry, there's a lot more work to do around what does it actually mean to design for circularity, for recyclability, for durability, all of those things. But we do know that there is a circularity hierarchy, and we want to keep products in circulation for as long as possible before we even think about recycling. So that's first and foremost, is the durability, the making sure that the company you're working with is tapped into product passports and reuse models and all of those brilliant things. When it comes to designing for circularity or for recycling, so when we set out this process to develop a recycling process back in 2012, we had no idea that the industry would evolve to where it is today with this level of understanding that there is a problem that needs solving. So we designed a process that was flexible, that could deal with clothing and textiles as they're produced today, for the most part. So pure poly and poly cotton blends. And we can take up to 10%, 5 to 10% other. So it can have elastane, other fibers in it, but that will come out as waste. So in some ways, and it depends which process you're designing for. If it's going into recovers, they're going to require different specifications. If it's Newcell, it's different specifications. So that's one big area to tackle now is, we have a job as recyclers to bring some unified messaging to what designers need to do to avoid you having to go and learn yourself what, what am I designing for? How do I know it's gonna get back to this recycling process? So there's still a lot of work to do around that, and I think the most important thing is to educate yourself around what's possible today, what's on the horizon, work with the industry associations and the groups like Accelerating Circularity, Reverse Resources, I mean, there's many more, to understand what, how we do need to be designing differently. But I think there are some basic rules of thumb, and don't give up blends, polycotton blends, because this is what we designed this process for. Mono fiber recycling will be simpler for both Recover and Newcell, but I think the solutions that are in development, while there's still some time before it's available globally, hopefully they will be able to answer all of the different types of fiber blends, but we can optimize it. That is the key. If we can start optimizing so that when a garment or lots of garments go into these processes, we have less waste coming out. So we have higher yields, and we can recapture as much of the raw materials that are going in to go back into new fiber and garments again.
Brilliant. So I've had two people ranting on stage. Can I now turn to Helene, please? What message would you like our audience to take away about how they should change their practice to make your life easier?
So, well, again, myself as well, just like Ross said, I don't try to pretend that I know exactly what your job is like as a designer, especially not for maybe synthetics or performance gear. But what we do, at least, is I kind of quote a friend of mine and a good colleague of mine who always said the designer needs to marry the waste collector, or in this case, maybe the recycler. Those conversations need to happen. And indeed, what design for cyclability means for Recover is not exactly the same as what design for cyclability means for Born Again Technologies or for Newcell, right? So it can be, maybe that can be complex, but that's a conversation that I think designers need to have, and to understand what are the end-of-life options, what are the recycling, the fiber-to-fiber recycling options, and how can my products fit in any of these technologies. The key point that I want to stress on this is that we can design products perfectly to be recycled at end of life, but if nobody designs these products with post-consumer recycled content in them, there is no circle. So this is always what I want to stress, is that we need to do both. Otherwise, because we can have all eco-design or let's say design for cyclability programs, and this is very important. But then if we recycle all of that and produce our fiber, you need to also use our fiber. So that's a little bit of that's my key message, my key takeaway.
Can I say one thing before we go to Harald? I just wanted to say as well, it is a complex and confusing space, because today if you're looking to use recycled content for polyester, you have to use bottles. That's pretty much all that's available for the most part. But just to have the understanding that fiber to fiber, textile to textile is coming, and eventually that is going to be replaced. But for solutions today, it's all about rPET from bottles. But that's going to change, over the coming years. And it's different depending on which fiber you're looking at. Are you using recycled cotton? Are you using cellulose that's been recaptured from cotton? I mean, it's a complex space, but I think there are a lot of organizations out there trying to help make it easier, and brands are making real headway in this area as well.
Yeah, thanks, Cyndi. And I would say that that's also not a switch we can just turn on, right? Because we slowly, step by step, are building our capacity. So slowly, step by step, these recycled content can grow in products, right? Or first in certain products and then scale to other products. Because at the moment, indeed, we're not there yet to be able to provide the entire world with all the post-consumer recycled materials for all new products yet. But we will get there at some point, hopefully.
I'm just going to put Harald on pause. Can I remind everyone, today's Sustain and Innovate conference, the theme is the EU Green Deal. It comes in 2024. You're designing 2024 now. The theme is the circular economy. This is a subject you have to get on board very fast with. But Harald, can I go to you? What message would you like to put in people's minds to inspire them to do better?
The same as Helene, I'd say. Design products with textile-to-textile recycled materials. That's the way we get this ball rolling, really. And well, it might feel that it's slow to come online, but it will be much faster if you keep nagging your suppliers and partners for recycled textile-to-textile products. So that's the secret behind why we've been able to build this plant that we have behind us. It's a bunch of big brands that have said we will buy this when it comes online, and then that's how we're going to keep building as well. So, and then we can think about, of course, design for recyclability, and you should, but there's a lot of waste out there right now. We need to get it into the product, and we'll start. And that gives us the capital and resources we need to sort this whole thing out. So if anything, design, go out and ask your suppliers for circulose, and they'll find a way to give it to you, and we'll find a way to produce it. And also to kind of unify with Ross's mission here as well. I want to emphasize that it's a very symbiotic kind of relationship that all of these players on stage have, and particularly with the reuse space as well. We want to provide a source of revenue for the sorters and collectors that handle the products that are primarily received by them, and the stuff that's not able to be sold again in the original shape. But so as designers, design with textile-to-textile recycled materials in it, and design desirable products, the stuff that you're good at, things that will be loved and cherished for a long time. And because we can't afford to get the consumer to think that textile-to-textile recycled materials are poor in that they have to compromise in any way. We have to up the idea of both reused, long-lasting, durable products, and that recycling can be part of that. So that's a lot of messages. Design textile-to-textile recycled materials, and design good products.
I can only echo that. That's fantastic. Now, I'm going to be rude. I'm not going to take questions from the audience. I'm going to read through those questions again. We need short answers if anyone wants to chip in. So I have questions like chemicals, one of the biggest hurdles in recycling. There's a list of chemicals used in the textile processing that are considered impurities for the recycling process. Anyone feel confident enough to answer that question?
Happy to kick off, because I know Recover have a different view on this because of our different processes. For us, anything non-polyester, cotton, or cellulose that comes into our process gets separated and comes out as waste. So we can deal with those impurities, we can deal with the contaminants, but I think there's a job by the industry to improve what you're putting in, so less bad stuff goes in or out. And especially, I think I'll hand it over to Helene for that one.
Yeah, thanks, Cyndi. I mean, I think that chemicals inside of the textiles, they don't give problems for our recycling process. So maybe that's just to make that clear. The only thing is that what comes in goes out. So when we're dealing with new chemical regulation, anything that is already inside clothes, especially for post-consumer, this is the case, right? Legacy chemicals, products that have already been out there for a long time that then have to be recycled. This can, for our process, be an issue, and actually also for any type of synthetics mechanical recycling process that is also not extracting this kind of chemicals. So that can be a challenge to then be compliant with new chemical regulation. And this is something that we're dealing with in trying to find some protocols or some policies that are workable, also for mechanical. Yeah.
The good advantage about having me as the moderator is that we're going to blow the time schedule. Sorry. Sorry, everyone else. Sorry, Anne, I know you want to come on with your panel. The next question, is the future of textile recycling chemical recycling? Can elastane be separated from cotton in chemical recycling?
I'm going to jump straight in there and be quick. The answer is both. I think the future is mechanical and chemical. There's a wide portfolio of solutions out there with different environmental impacts, and we need to welcome them all. They have to be economically viable. Second question, yes, chemical recycling can handle up to a certain percentage. It depends which process it is of elastane, so we don't want the industry to have to stop using it. And I personally don't want the industry to stop using elastane. But yeah, I think it's going to be a combination of both.
Anyone want to add to that? Harold, Helene, Ross? Further comments?
Just in our view, no, chemical and mechanical recycling in combination. And in fact, you want to have some kind of, as designers, you want to have the ability to design products that have certain characteristics, and mechanical and chemical recycling outputs generate different kind of characteristics that you want to be able to work with. So I think that will grow very much in tandem. On chemicals, I wanted to say, just try to get out the fossil-based ones at least, so we can keep working on the CO2 as well. And finally, with elastane, yes, we've also developed. We have the capability of taking a certain percentage of it. In our process, it's not recycled. So if you want to get more of your products recycled, think about making it into cellulosic, and think about the bio-based alternatives that you're seeing around there. Because that does work well for us. So, yeah.
Brilliant. On to the next question. With the export obstacles, things like the cost, to the EU post-Brexit, how will the UK be able to collaborate with the EU-based textile recycling, sorting, disassembly programme?
Well, it just means a lot more form filling. We're doing it now, we're exporting it. Provided you follow the correct procedures, it can be done. So it's not, I don't think it's going to stop us.
And
straight to the point answer, thank you.
And we're also looking at developing our own advanced textile sorting in the UK to get around that.
Brilliant.
Proximity principle.
And finally, a question for Cyndi. Cyndi Rhoades, what was the product you were releasing in Zurich soon? Is it made by Worn Again, or what is the brand called? I think that's a bit of confusion. You're creating a plant within Zurich. Do you want to say a bit more?
Sure.
And also when we might be able to see it. We were going to have something early December, but it's been delayed.
So we've announced the groundbreaking of the Zurich plant. It's not been built yet. That's what our 30 million fundraise was to build. It's been designed, but I can't give any dates at the moment. That is to come, but it's a 1,000-ton demonstration plant, which provides the kind of architectural plan to build the industrial plant.
And finally, Anne, the best question out there. Considering its negative impact, what's the future of polyester? Will it be replaced by other materials, or can we move to fibre recycled polyester only? Can we extend the loop of polyester?
I'm the only polyester one here, so I'm going to answer that. I am a massive believer in the fact that polyester is one of the most circular materials. Because it's man-made, we can bring it back, we can bring the quality back to a virgin equivalent molecular weight, for those of you who understand the technology behind it. But absolutely, we have all this polyester in circulation, and my belief is that what we need to work towards is banning the use of virgin polyester, but moving to circular and just using what we have. We still have to deal with the microfiber issue. There's a lot to do on that front, but we already have it in circulation. So let's, move towards circular polyester. The technology is coming, and it's a great material that is probably everywhere in this building.
And with
too good to be burned and turned into CO2. So let's not do that.
Exactly. With that, I've got to pull this to a close. Otherwise, Anne is never going to forgive me because I will be overrunning her schedule. Can I ask you, can I give a patronizing bit of advice? These people know what they're talking about. The fashion industry is on board getting in there. As outdoor, we're not as switched on as we think we are. You need to start these conversations now. But please, would you all show your appreciation for the team that I've been able to bring together? Harald, Helene, thank you for coming virtually. Ross and Cyndi, thank you for turning up within reality.